I want to tell you something that happened to me on a December evening many years ago that changed everything I understood about manifestation timing and the invisible power that shapes our lives. And I'm sharing it now because what I discovered that night holds a secret about Christmas Eve that most people will never know. A secret that could change your entire life if you understand it before December 24th arrives. I was sitting alone in my small apartment in New York City. The radiator was clanking, snow was falling outside my window, and I was broke. Not just a little short on money, but truly desperately broke. I had 27 cents to my name. 27 cents. And Christmas was 3 days away. I remember looking at those coins in my palm and feeling something I'd never quite felt before. It wasn't just fear or worry. It was a kind of spiritual emergency. Because you see, I'd been teaching about prosperity consciousness. I'd been telling people that their words had power, that their thoughts created their reality, that the universe was abundant and responsive. And there I sat with 27 cents, wondering if I'd been fooling myself all along. But something happened that night. Something that would later become the foundation of everything I would teach about manifestation and perfect timing. I was about to discover that Christmas Eve holds a frequency, a spiritual doorway that appears only once a year. And what you do with that doorway, what you understand about it, determines whether the coming year unfolds in struggle or in grace. Most people think manifestation is about working harder on your visualizations, affirming more intensely, or holding your desire more tightly. But that night, I learned something entirely different. I learned about surrender timing, about divine appointments, about how the universe has certain moments when the veil between the invisible and the visible becomes so thin that what normally takes months can happen in moments. And Christmas Eve is one of those moments, not because of the holiday itself, but because of what's happening in the collective consciousness of humanity. For just a few hours, millions of people simultaneously open their hearts. They think about giving, they remember love, they become tender, they hope for miracles, and that collective opening creates a tidal wave of spiritual energy that you can ride if you know how. But here's what you must understand, and this is critical. Most people completely miss this wave because they're doing manifestation backwards. They're trying to use Christmas Eve to get something to manipulate the universe into giving them what they want. And the universe doesn't respond to manipulation. It never has. It never will. The universe responds to alignment, to surrender, to a very specific kind of spiritual posture that I'm going to teach you today. Because that night, with my 27 cents, I finally stopped trying to make things happen. I stopped affirming and visualizing and trying to convince the universe that I deserved prosperity. Instead, I did something that felt completely counterintuitive. I surrendered, but not in defeat. I surrendered into something, into a knowing, into a trust so complete that it required no evidence. And what happened in the 72 hours that followed taught me the real secret of manifestation, the secret that has nothing to do with effort and everything to do with becoming a clear channel for what already wants to come through you. So, if you're watching this and something in you is hungry for a breakthrough, if you're tired of trying so hard and getting nowhere, if you've been waiting for your life to finally shift into the abundance and joy and love you know is possible, then what I'm about to share with you could be the missing piece. Not because I'm going to give you a new technique, but because I'm going to help you understand how divine timing actually works and why Christmas Eve represents one of the most powerful manifestation portals of the entire year. But you have to understand it correctly. You have to approach it with clean hands and a pure heart, as the ancient texts say. You have to stop trying to use spiritual laws to get what you want, and instead learn how to become what you seek. That's the real secret. Not attraction, but embodiment. Not receiving, but becoming. And Christmas Eve offers you a very specific opportunity to make that shift in a way that can alter the trajectory of your entire coming year. Now, before I tell you what happened in those 72 hours after my 27-cent moment, and before I share the exact practice you need to do before December 24th, I need to give you some context. I need to help you understand what's really happening beneath the surface of your life right now, and why most of what you've been taught about manifestation has kept you stuck in a cycle of temporary results and ultimate disappointment. You see, there are two ways to approach manifestation. The first way is what I call the demanding consciousness. This is when you come to the universe with a list of requirements. You want the money, the relationship, the health, the recognition. You've decided what you need to be happy, and you're using spiritual techniques to try to make the universe comply with your plan. You're affirming, visualizing, scripting, asking, demanding, and sometimes it even works. Sometimes you get what you asked for, but have you noticed that even when you get it, something still feels empty? Something still feels like it's missing. That's because demanding consciousness, no matter how positive or spiritual it sounds, is still rooted in separation. It's still rooted in the belief that you are here, and your good is somewhere out there, and you have to find a way to drag it across the distance and make it yours. This approach exhausts people. I see it everywhere. People are so tired from trying to manifest. They're tired of the vision boards that don't work, tired of the affirmations that feel hollow, tired of the disappointment when December 31st arrives, and they're still stuck in the same life they were trying to escape 12 months earlier, and they blame themselves. They think they didn't believe hard enough, visualize clearly enough, raise their vibration high enough. But that's not the problem. The problem is the entire paradigm. The problem is that demanding consciousness will only ever give you temporary results because it's building on a foundation of lack. The second way to approach manifestation is what I call the allowing consciousness. And this is what I stumbled into that night with my 27 cents. Allowing consciousness doesn't come to the universe with demands. It comes with availability. It doesn't say, I need this specific thing by this specific date. It says, I am ready to receive what is mine by divine right. I am open to good that exceeds anything I could imagine or plan. I am available to be used by the universe for purposes greater than my small self can conceive. And here's the miracle. When you shift from demanding to allowing, from grasping to receiving, from planning to trusting, everything changes. Not because you're doing a better technique, but because you've changed your fundamental relationship with life itself. Most people have no idea how to make this shift. They've been so conditioned to believe that they have to make things happen, that they have to force and push and strive, that the idea of allowing feels passive. It feels like giving up. But allowing is not passive. Allowing is the most active thing you can do because it requires you to continuously release fear, release control, release your attachment to specific outcomes, and stay open in the face of uncertainty. That takes tremendous spiritual strength. That takes practice. That takes a kind of courage that our culture doesn't even recognize as courage, because it looks like stillness on the outside. And this is where Christmas Eve comes in, because Christmas Eve is practice. It's a moment when the universe gives you the perfect conditions to shift from demanding consciousness to allowing consciousness. It's a moment when the collective energy is so oriented toward love and giving and miracles that you can ride that wave right into a new state of being. But only if you know what you're doing. Only if you understand the real mechanism at play. Let me tell you what happened after that night. After my moment of surrender with 27 cents in my hand. It was December 21st. Christmas Eve was 3 days away. I had no plan, no strategy, no idea how I was going to pay my rent or buy food. But something had shifted in me. I had stopped fighting. I had stopped trying to figure it out. I had simply said to the universe, to God, to whatever intelligence runs this mysterious existence, I am yours. Use me, provide for me, show me what I cannot see. And then I went to bed. The next morning, December 22nd, I received a letter in the mail. It was from a woman I'd met briefly at a lecture 6 months earlier. I barely remembered her, but she had remembered me. And she wrote to say that something I'd said that evening had changed her life. She'd been suicidal. My words had given her hope. She'd rebuilt her entire existence. And now, 6 months later, she felt moved to send me a gift. In the envelope was a check for $500. $500. In that era, in my circumstances, it was a fortune. But it wasn't the money that shocked me. It was the timing. It was the fact that this woman had felt moved to write that letter and send that check at the exact moment I needed it, even though she had no way of knowing my situation. That's when I began to understand something about how the universe actually works. It's not that the universe responds to your demands. It's that the universe is always orchestrating synchronicities, always arranging divine appointments, always trying to deliver your good to you. But it can only deliver to you what you're ready to receive. And most of us are not ready to receive because we're too busy demanding, controlling, planning, forcing. We're so locked into our own agenda that we can't see the gifts that are trying to reach us from unexpected directions. The $500 was just the beginning. On December 23rd, I received a phone call from a publisher who wanted to discuss a book. On Christmas Eve itself, I had a conversation with someone who would become one of the most important teachers in my life. And on Christmas Day, I woke up knowing with absolute certainty that I would never again doubt the universe's ability to provide for me. Not because I'd gotten what I wanted, but because I'd witnessed how the invisible becomes visible when you stop blocking it with your fear and control. That Christmas taught me the secret I'm going to share with you today. It taught me that there are certain moments in time when the universe is especially ready to deliver your good, and Christmas Eve is one of those moments. But you cannot approach it with demanding consciousness. You cannot come with your wish list and your expectations. You must come empty, available, surrendered, and from that emptiness, from that availability, miracles flow. Now, I know some of you are thinking, that's easy to say, but I have real problems, real bills, real situations that need real solutions. I understand. I've been there. But what I'm trying to help you see is that your real problems cannot be solved from the level of consciousness that created them. Your demanding, controlling, fearful consciousness is what's keeping your problems in place. And no amount of effort from that consciousness will set you free. You need a shift. A fundamental reorientation of your relationship with life. And Christmas Eve offers you the perfect opportunity to make that shift. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to walk you through exactly what's happening beneath the surface of your life right now. I'm going to tell you why your manifestations haven't been working the way you hoped. I'm going to share stories that will help you see the patterns in your own experience. And then I'm going to give you a very specific practice to do before, on, and after December 24th that will align you with the allowing consciousness I've been describing. Not a technique to get what you want, but a practice to become available to what's trying to reach you. But first, you need to understand something about divine appointments and spiritual timing. Because without this understanding, you'll misuse the power of Christmas Eve and end up disappointed. Again, there's a reason your life looks the way it looks right now, not because you deserve it, or because you're being punished, or because you did something wrong, but because your current reality is a perfect reflection of your current consciousness. Everything you see in your external world, your bank account, your relationships, your health, your opportunities, all of it is a mirror showing you the state of your inner world. This is not a punishment. This is information. This is feedback. This is the universe helping you see where you're blocked, where you're afraid, where you're still trying to control instead of allow. Most people don't want to hear this. They want to believe that their problems are external, that they just need more money or a better partner or a different job. But I'm here to tell you the truth. Even if it's uncomfortable, your external circumstances will not change until your internal consciousness changes. You can win the lottery tomorrow and still be broke within a year. If your prosperity consciousness hasn't shifted, you can meet the perfect partner and still end up lonely if your love consciousness hasn't healed. The external is always following the internal. Always. No exceptions. This is actually good news even though it doesn't feel like it at first, because it means you have power, real power. Not the power to manipulate circumstances, but the power to shift your consciousness. And when your consciousness shifts, your entire world reorganizes itself to match your new state of being. This is the law. This is how it works. This is what I've witnessed in my own life and in the lives of countless others who've dared to test these principles. I remember a woman who came to me absolutely desperate. Her husband had left her for another woman, and she was consumed, absolutely consumed with bitterness and the desire for revenge. She wanted to see him suffer. She wanted the other woman to fail. She rehearsed imaginary conversations where she told them both exactly what she thought of them. And do you know what happened? She became ill. Her body began to break down under the weight of all that poison she was carrying. I said to her, "You must bless them. You must release them completely. Every time you think of them, you must say, 'I release you to your highest good. I bless you and set you free.'" She looked at me like I had lost my mind. "Bless them," she said. "After what they've done to me? Never." But desperation is a powerful teacher. When you've exhausted every other option, when hatred has brought you nothing but sleepless nights and a body that's turning against you, you become willing to try something different. So she began reluctantly at first to speak these words of release. Not because she felt them. Oh no, she didn't feel them at all in the beginning. But she spoke them anyway, mechanically, like a child reciting lessons. And then something miraculous happened. After several weeks of this practice, something in her shifted. The knot in her chest began to loosen. She could breathe again. She could sleep. And within a few months, an opportunity came to her. A position in another city, a fresh start, new friends, a life she actually wanted rather than the prison she'd been living in. The husband, she stopped caring. He became irrelevant to her happiness. That's true freedom. You see, when you hold on to resentment, when you refuse to forgive, you're not punishing the other person. You're punishing yourself. You're the one drinking the poison and expecting someone else to die. The universe doesn't work that way. What you give out, you get back. What you hold in your heart creates your reality. I've seen people transform their entire financial situation the moment they stopped hoarding and started flowing. There was a woman I knew who was barely scraping by. She counted every penny with fear, clutched her small savings like a drowning person clutches a life raft. And the tighter she held on, the less she had. One day I told her, "You're damming up the stream, let it flow." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but something in her shifted. She decided to give, not from her abundance because she didn't have any, but from her faith. She bought groceries for a neighbor who had even less. She slipped a few dollars into the collection plate when everything in her screamed to hold back. And do you know what happened? Within 2 weeks, she received an unexpected check from an old insurance claim she'd forgotten about. A month later, she was offered a better-paying position. The floodgates opened because she opened first. This isn't magic. This is law. The law of circulation. Your money is energy. Your love is energy. Your time, your talents, your very presence, all energy. And energy must move. When you try to bottle it up, seal it tight, keep it all for yourself, it stagnates. It becomes toxic. But when you let it flow through you, from the universe, through you, and back out into the world, you become a channel of infinite supply. The key is motive. You cannot give in order to get. The universe reads your heart, not your actions. If you're giving with one hand while mentally calculating what you'll receive with the other, you've already blocked the flow. That's manipulation, not circulation. That's bargaining, not faith. Give because it brings you joy. Give because you recognize abundance all around you. Give because you trust that there is always enough for you, for me, for everyone. That trust is what opens the channels. And here's something crucial. You must give with love, with gladness, with a sense of privilege. If you give resentfully, grudgingly, from a sense of obligation or guilt, you're poisoning the stream. You might as well not give at all. The universe responds to the feeling behind the action always. I've watched people give spectacular donations with great fanfare, and I've watched those same people wonder why their own supply seemed to dry up afterward. The reason they gave for recognition. They gave to be seen. They gave to control how they were perceived. And the universe, which reads the heart like you and I read a newspaper, simply could not reward that vibration. Contrast this with a woman I knew who could barely afford her rent. Yet, she always kept coins in her pocket for anyone who asked. She never announced it. She never kept score. When you complimented her generosity, she'd looked genuinely confused, as though giving were as natural as breathing. Her supply, it never ran out. Money came to her through the strangest channels, a forgotten bank account, an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative, clients appearing out of nowhere. She lived in the flow because she gave from the flow. This is what I mean when I say giving must be joyful. It must feel like release, not loss, like planting, not depleting. When you give and feel lighter, freer, more spacious, that's the signal you've given correctly. When you give and feel resentful, diminished, or anxious about your own security, you've missed the mark entirely. Here's a practice I recommend. Before you give anything, money, time, energy, attention, pause, and check your inner weather. What does it feel like? Is there joy there, willingness, or is there a clenched fist somewhere inside you? A small voice keeping ledgers and accounts? If you sense resistance, don't override it with willpower. Stop. Bless the person or cause, but wait until your heart has shifted. Giving from obligation builds debt in your consciousness, not credit. And let's address something many spiritual teachers ignore. You are not required to give to everyone who asks. This shocks people. They believe that spiritual law demands they say yes to every outstretched hand, every charity letter, every friend in need. Nonsense. Your intuition will always guide you toward right giving. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no, because your no protects both your energy and their opportunity to find their true source. I knew a man who gave to every single request, terrified that refusal would block his good. He gave when his spirit said no. He gave when he felt manipulated. He gave to prove he was generous. Within 2 years, he was bankrupt and bitter, blaming the universe for betraying him. But the universe hadn't betrayed him. He had betrayed himself by ignoring his inner guidance. His story taught me something crucial. The inner voice isn't always convenient. It doesn't always tell us what we want to hear. Sometimes it whispers caution when we want confirmation. Sometimes it urges us forward when we want to stay safe. And that's precisely why so many people choose to ignore it. But here's what I've observed time and time again. Ignoring your inner voice doesn't silence it. It simply forces it to speak through circumstances instead. That nagging feeling you dismissed becomes the opportunity that passes you by. That quiet warning you overrode becomes the lesson you learn the hard way. The universe is remarkably persistent in its attempts to guide us. I remember a woman who came to me in tears. She had married a man despite every fiber of her being screaming no at the altar. I thought I was just nervous, she told me. I thought it was normal wedding jitters. Everyone said he was perfect for me, successful, handsome, from the right family. How could I trust some feeling over all that evidence? But that feeling, as she discovered within months, was her inner wisdom recognizing what her conscious mind refused to see. The perfection was performance. The success was built on deception. Everything her logical mind had cataloged as assets, her inner voice had recognized as red flags in disguise. I knew, she whispered to me on some level. I absolutely knew. And I married him anyway. This is the tragedy of living disconnected from divine guidance. We don't just make wrong choices. We make them while knowing deep down that they're wrong. And that knowledge, that betrayal of our own inner wisdom, creates a wound that runs far deeper than any external consequence. The good news, your inner voice never abandons you. Even after years of being ignored, dismissed, or overridden, it remains faithful, waiting, ready to guide you the moment you're willing to listen. I've seen people reconnect with their intuition after decades of ignoring it. The voice is always there, though sometimes it's been buried under so many layers of doubt, fear, and external programming that we've forgotten how to hear it. Think of intuition like a radio frequency that's always broadcasting. The signal never stops, never weakens, never abandons you. But if your receiver is clogged with static from worry, from overthinking, from the constant noise of other people's opinions and expectations, you won't be able to tune in clearly. That's what happened to most of us. We didn't lose the signal, we just stopped knowing how to listen. Children are naturally intuitive because they haven't learned to question that inner voice yet. A child will tell you, "I don't like that person," without any logical reason, and they're usually right. They feel energy. They trust their gut without needing evidence or justification. But then we grow up and we're taught that feelings aren't facts, that logic trumps instinct, that we need proof before we can trust ourselves. And slowly, gradually, that beautiful natural receiver gets buried. Here's what I know for certain. You cannot think your way to intuitive knowing. You feel your way there. Intuition doesn't live in your head. It lives in your body. In that sudden knowing in your gut, in the hair standing up on the back of your neck, in the warmth you feel around certain people, and the cold contraction around others. Your body is constantly giving you information, but we've been trained to override it with mental justifications. How many times have you met someone and immediately felt uncomfortable, but you told yourself you were being judgmental? How many times have you felt pulled toward a certain decision, but you talked yourself out of it because it didn't make logical sense? That's the moment where we abandon ourselves. I remember a woman who came to me heartbroken because she'd lost a job opportunity she was certain was meant for her. She'd prayed, affirmed, visualized, done everything right. And then, at the last moment, the position was given to someone else. She felt betrayed by the universe. "Why would God show me this door if He wasn't going to open it?" she asked. I told her what I'm telling you now. Sometimes God closes a door because the building is scheduled for demolition. 3 months later, she was offered a position at another company, one that paid more, aligned better with her values, and came with opportunities the first job never could have provided. The company she'd originally wanted to work for, they went through massive layoffs 6 months later. Divine timing had protected her, but she couldn't see it until she was standing in her actual good. This is the faith we must cultivate. Not blind faith, not passive faith, but active, expectant faith that knows what's mine is already mine, and it's making its way to me right now. And here's what most people don't understand about that faith. It doesn't require you to see the path. It only requires you to see the promise. Think of it like ordering something online. You don't need to know which warehouse it's coming from, which delivery driver will bring it, what route they'll take. You just need the confirmation number. You just need to know it's been shipped. That's spiritual faith. You have your confirmation. Your word is law. The universe has processed your order. Now you simply prepare to receive. I've watched people sabotage their own demonstrations 1,000 times by demanding to know the how. They want God to send them a detailed itinerary. They want a step-by-step blueprint before they'll believe. But that's not how the invisible becomes visible. That's not how miracles work. The how is none of your business. Your business is the what and the when is always now in consciousness. A woman once came to me in absolute desperation. She needed $5,000 within a week, or she'd lose her home. $5,000. She had no job, no savings, no obvious source. I said to her, "Your word is law. Speak it now." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "But how?" she kept asking. "Where will it come from? Who will give it to me?" And I said, "That's God's problem, not yours. Your job is to claim it and believe it. God's job is to deliver it." She finally agreed. We spoke the word together. Infinite Spirit, open the way for the immediate manifestation of $5,000. It comes to me under grace in perfect ways. 3 days later, a relative she hadn't spoken to in years called her out of the blue, an inheritance she didn't even know existed. $7,000. Now listen, could I have predicted that would be the channel? Absolutely not. Could she have made that happen through her own scheming? Never in a million years. That's the point. The universe has access to infinite channels you know nothing about. Your limited human mind can only see 3 or 4 possible solutions. God sees 3 million. When you insist on knowing the how, you're actually blocking the flow. You're telling the universe, only bring it to me this way, through this person, by this method. And the universe says, okay, if you insist, but I had a much easier route planned. So here's what I want you to try instead. Stop planning the route. Stop white-knuckling the steering wheel of your manifestation. Instead, become ridiculously specific about the destination and gloriously vague about the journey. Tell the universe times what times you want, not times how times it should arrive. You want financial freedom? Perfect. Declare it. Feel it. But don't decide it has to come through a promotion at your current job, or through your Etsy shop finally taking off, or through some specific investment. The moment you do that, you've just eliminated 900 other pathways that were opening up for you. I've watched this play out in the most fascinating ways. A woman came to me once, desperate for money to save her home. She was convinced, absolutely convinced, that the only solution was for her estranged brother to finally pay back the loan she'd given him years ago. She spent every waking moment obsessing over this, calling him, writing him letters, imagining conversations where he apologized and handed her a check. Total stranglehold on the how. I told her, speak your word for the money. Declare that your supply is infinite and immediate, but release your brother from your mental demands. Let the universe surprise you. She was resistant at first. That money from her brother felt like justice, like the right time's way for it to come, but she was desperate enough to try. Within 2 weeks, an old friend reached out about a consulting opportunity. Within a month, she had more than enough to save her home. And here's the kicker. 6 months later, her brother did pay her back, but by then, she didn't need it anymore. The universe had already handled it through a completely different channel. This is what I mean by infinite pathways. You think you see one door. The universe sees 1,000. Your job isn't to pick the lock on the one door you've decided is the door. Your job is to stand in your power, declare your word, and stay open to whichever door swings open first. Because forcing a specific outcome is like trying to force a flower to bloom at midnight in winter. You can stand there with your watering can. You can shine a flashlight on it. You can will it with every fiber of your being. But you're working against the natural rhythm of things. And when you work against the rhythm, you create resistance. When you create resistance, you block the flow. I learned this the hard way, as most of us do. I wanted a particular outcome so badly I could taste it. I had declared my word, visualized it, affirmed it morning and night, but I had also attached myself to exactly how and when it would arrive. I had written the universe's script, directed its actors, and scheduled the curtain call. And then I waited, and the door I was watching stayed firmly shut. Meanwhile, 3 other doors opened that I completely ignored because they weren't my door. They didn't look like what I had imagined. So I let them close while I kept knocking on the one that wouldn't budge. It wasn't until I finally exhausted myself, until I released my white-knuckled grip on that one specific outcome, that I noticed what was actually happening around me. The universe had been answering me all along, just not in the language I was demanding it speak. This is what my way or the way means. You hold your vision. Yes, you speak your word with authority. Absolutely. But then you must, and I cannot emphasize this enough, you must allow the infinite intelligence to deliver it through the path of least resistance. Not the path you've decided is correct. Not the timeline you've deemed acceptable, but the path that actually works. The universe is not your assistant. It's your partner. And partners collaborate. You bring the desire, the faith, the expectancy. The universe brings the how, the when, the through whom. Your job is to stay so anchored in the knowing that you don't collapse into panic when things unfold differently than you pictured. That's the secret nobody tells you about manifestation. It's not about controlling outcomes. It's about controlling your inner atmosphere while the universe rearranges the furniture of your life. I once knew a woman who wanted desperately to be married. She'd been alone for years, and every birthday felt like a referendum on her worth. She prayed, she visualized, she did everything the books told her to do. And then one day she stopped asking for a husband. Instead, she asked for this: "Let me become the woman who is ready for her perfect union." See the difference? She stopped trying to drag the future into her present. She started preparing her consciousness for what she said she wanted. She took a pottery class. She learned to cook elaborate meals just for herself. She bought beautiful sheets and fresh flowers for her own bedroom. She stopped treating her life like a waiting room and started treating it like the main event. 6 months later, she met her husband. But here's what she told me. "Florence, by the time he showed up, I was so content that I almost didn't notice." That's not indifference. That's readiness. That's a consciousness that has already claimed its good. The universe doesn't respond to begging, it responds to assumption. When you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, when you inhabit that version of yourself internally, you become a magnet for its physical equivalent. You stop chasing, you start attracting. But let me be clear about something. This isn't about pretending. This isn't about fake it till you make it affirmations that you don't believe. That's just noise. I'm talking about a genuine shift in your inner conviction. I'm talking about the moment when you stop hoping it might happen and start knowing it must happen because you've aligned yourself with the law. And here's where people get tripped up. They think that knowing means having all the answers. It doesn't. Knowing means trusting the process even when you can't see the path. It means understanding that closed doors aren't rejections, they're redirections. This knowing I'm describing isn't passive. It's not about sitting back and waiting for life to happen to you. It's active faith combined with inspired action. It's saying yes to opportunities that align with your vision, even when they seem small or insignificant. It's about recognizing that every step forward, no matter how tiny, is still movement in the right direction. I've watched people sabotage themselves because they were waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect circumstances, the perfect feeling of readiness. But here's what I know to be true. The universe doesn't reward perfection. It rewards commitment. It rewards those who are willing to take messy action, who are willing to stumble forward even when their knees are shaking. Think about planting a seed. You don't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You don't stand over it with anxiety, demanding it sprout according to your timeline. You water it. You give it sunlight. You trust that beneath the surface, in the darkness of the soil, something miraculous is happening. The same principle applies to your dreams, your goals, your desires. There's an invisible process unfolding, and your job is to maintain the conditions for growth, not to control every aspect of the outcome. This is where so many people lose their way. They confuse control with power. They think that knowing every detail, managing every variable, and eliminating every risk is what will bring them success. But that's the ego talking. That's fear dressed up as strategy. Real power comes from knowing your worth, declaring your intention, and then allowing the universe to orchestrate the details in ways that are far more elegant and effective than you could have planned. I want you to understand something crucial. Your lack of knowledge about the how is not a weakness. It's actually your strength. When you don't know how something will happen, you can't limit it with your imagination. You can't box it in with your past experiences or your current understanding. You leave room for miracles. You leave room for opportunities you never could have conceived on your own. The universe is infinitely creative. It has resources you've never heard of. It has connections you don't know exist. It has timing that's more perfect than anything you could orchestrate. But it can only work its magic when you step back from trying to figure it all out and instead step forward in faith. And this is where most people stumble. They want the outcome, but they won't release the how. They pray for the thing, but they hold on tight to their own limited ideas of how it must arrive. They say, "Yes, universe, I'm ready." But then they add a footnote, "only if it comes through this person at this time in this exact way." That's not faith. That's control dressed up in spiritual language. Real faith says, "I know what I want. I've claimed it. I've spoken it. And now I trust the invisible intelligence that orchestrates galaxies to handle the details of my little life. You see, your job isn't to be the architect and the builder and the inspector. Your job is to hold the vision and follow the intuitive hits. Your job is to stay open. Your job is to notice when a door cracks open and to walk through it, even when it doesn't look like the door you were expecting. I've watched people turn down the perfect opportunity because it didn't match the picture in their head. I've seen someone reject the ideal relationship because the person showed up in jeans instead of a suit. I've seen artists refuse the big break because it came through a channel they deemed beneath them. And then they wonder why their prayers go unanswered. Your prayers are answered all the time. You're just so busy looking left that you miss the miracle arriving from the right. The universe doesn't care about your ego's preferences, it cares about your soul's evolution. And sometimes, often actually, the quickest path to your desire comes through the route you would have never chosen. That job you didn't want to apply for becomes the connection that changes everything. That person who annoyed you at the coffee shop turns out to be the collaborator you've been asking for. That failure that crushed you clears the way for something 10 times better. But you'll only see this in hindsight if you're rigid. You'll only recognize the miracle after years of resisting it. What if instead you practice flexibility right now? What if you said, I know what I want, but I'm open to being surprised by how it comes? What if you stopped micromanaging the universe and started marveling at its creativity? Because here's the truth, the universe is more creative than you are. It has more resources, it has better timing, and it's always working in your favor, even when it looks like everything's falling apart, especially then. So what does that mean for you, practically speaking? It means you stop trying to force the river to flow uphill. You stop exhausting yourself, trying to make things happen through sheer willpower and anxiety. You start recognizing that there's an intelligence at work that's far greater than your limited perspective can comprehend. I've watched people spin their wheels for years, trying to control every variable, manage every outcome, anticipate every obstacle. And you know what happens? They miss the open door standing right beside them because they're too busy trying to break down a wall. The universe doesn't need your help. It needs your cooperation. And cooperation looks like this. You set your intention. You speak your word. You hold your vision clearly in your mind. And then, and this is the part most people get wrong, you relax into knowing it's done. You don't white-knuckle it. You don't obsess. You don't check the mailbox 17 times a day wondering where your good is. You live as if it's already handled because it is. Now, I can hear some of you saying, but Florence, what about action? Don't I have to do something? Of course you do. But there's a difference between inspired action and desperate action. Inspired action feels light. It feels natural. It's the thing you're nudged to do that makes you think, I don't know why, but I feel like I should call that person, or something's telling me to take that class, or I keep thinking about that opportunity. Desperate action feels heavy. It's rooted in fear. It's the thing you do because you're panicking, because you don't trust, because you think if you don't force it, nothing will happen. The universe works through inspired action. It whispers, it nudges, it opens paths, but it can't guide you if you're too busy running around like a chicken with its head cut off trying to orchestrate everything yourself. I knew a man once who was desperate for a new job. He sent out hundreds of resumes, cold-called companies, exhausted himself networking at every event he could find. Nothing worked. He was getting more frustrated, more bitter, more convinced the world was against him. Then one day, he just stopped. He was worn out. He said to himself, fine, I surrender. I'm going to trust that what's meant for me will find me. 3 days later, his neighbor, someone he'd barely spoken to, knocked on his door and asked if he'd be interested in a position at his company. It was exactly what he'd been looking for. Better pay than he'd hoped for, and it required skills he didn't even know were valuable. The job had been there the whole time, but he couldn't see it because he was too busy forcing. Here's the continuation. This is the great paradox of manifestation that most people never grasp. The harder you chase, the faster it runs. The tighter you grip, the more it slips through your fingers. But the moment you release, the moment you trust, everything you need comes flooding toward you. I've watched this principle play out in relationships too. A woman once came to me in tears. She'd been dating someone for months, trying to make him commit, trying to shape him into the partner she wanted. She was exhausting herself with effort, planning perfect dates, changing her appearance, monitoring every word she said. And the more she tried, the more distant he became. I told her what I'm telling you now. Stop treating love like a negotiation. You're not here to convince anyone of your worth. She looked at me like I'd suggested she give up entirely, but I hadn't. I'd suggested she give up control. There's a difference. Within 2 weeks of her releasing this man emotionally, he proposed. Not because of any trick or strategy, but because the energy between them finally had room to breathe. She stopped being a person desperate to be chosen and became a person at peace with herself. And that shift changed everything. You see, when you're forcing, you're broadcasting a very specific frequency, lack. You're telling the universe, I don't have this, and I'm terrified I never will. And the universe, being the perfect mirror that it is, reflects that fear right back to you. It gives you more situations that confirm your lack, more evidence that you need to struggle. But when you let go, when you truly release your death grip on outcomes, you begin broadcasting a different frequency entirely. Abundance. You're saying, I trust that what's mine will find me. I don't need to chase because I know I'm already provided for. And suddenly, the universe has no choice but to match that energy. This doesn't mean you become passive. It doesn't mean you stop taking action or setting intentions. It means you stop acting from fear and start acting from faith. You do the work, yes, but you do it with open hands, not clenched fists. I knew a young artist who wanted desperately to be discovered. She sent her portfolio to every gallery, every agent, every possible connection. She spent years hearing no and feeling rejected. Then one day, exhausted and heartbroken, she decided to stop trying to be discovered and just create for the joy of it. She stopped asking, will this sell? And started asking, does this make me come alive? She painted what moved her, what fascinated her, what she couldn't stop thinking about. And something miraculous happened. When she released the outcome changed. Within 6 months, a gallery owner saw her work online and offered her a solo show. Within a year, she was making more from her art than she ever had while chasing recognition. This is the spiritual law. When you stop forcing the flower to bloom, it blooms naturally. When you release your white-knuckled grip on how things must happen, the universe can surprise you with something better than you imagined. I know someone will say, but I've been patient. I've been positive and nothing has changed. Here's what I want you to understand. There's a difference between patient waiting and vibrational alignment. You can wait with resentment, with doubt, with impatience simmering beneath the surface. That kind of waiting doesn't open doors. It reinforces the very frequency of lack you're trying to escape. True alignment means you feel the relief now. You feel the gratitude now. You live as though the answer is already on its way, even when you can't see evidence yet. This isn't pretending. This isn't toxic positivity. This is shifting your inner state so completely that your outer world has no choice but to reorganize itself around your new frequency. Think of it like tuning a radio. You don't say, I'll feel good when I hear the music. You tune to the station first, and then you hear the music. You don't receive because you feel good. You feel good, and therefore you receive. So what do you do when you're in the middle of the storm and you can't see the shore? You anchor yourself in knowing, not hoping, not wishing, but knowing. You say, divine order is establishing itself now. What is mine is finding me. I don't need to see the entire path. I only need to take the next right step. The universe moves at its own perfect pace. And when you align yourself with this divine timing, you'll notice something miraculous. Doors open exactly when you're ready to walk through them. Not a moment before, not a moment after. I've watched people torture themselves with the when question. When will I meet my partner? When will my business succeed? When will I finally have enough? And in that obsessive questioning, they missed the gifts arriving right now in this present moment. Let me tell you about a woman who came to me desperate and exhausted. She had been affirming abundance for months, visualizing, declaring, doing everything she'd learned. "Why hasn't it manifested?" she demanded. "What am I doing wrong?" I asked her a simple question. "Have you noticed the opportunities that have appeared this week?" She looked confused. "What opportunities?" "Nothing has happened." But as we talked, the truth emerged. A colleague had invited her to a networking event she declined because she was too busy affirming. A friend mentioned a job opening. She dismissed it because it wasn't her ideal vision. Someone had complimented her work. She'd barely acknowledged it because she was focused on the big breakthrough that hadn't come yet. You see, the universe had been answering her all along, but she was so fixated on what abundance should look like that she couldn't recognize what abundance was trying to become. This is the divine paradox. You must hold your vision clearly while remaining open to how it manifests. The what is yours to declare. The how belongs to infinite intelligence. Think of yourself as a gardener who plants seeds. You choose what to plant, roses, not weeds. You water them, you tend the soil, you create the right conditions. But you don't stand over the ground screaming, "Grow, grow faster." You don't dig up the seeds every day to check on their progress. You trust the process. You trust the unseen work happening beneath the surface. Your demonstrations work the same way. There's always an invisible gestation period. The more peaceful you remain during this period, the faster your good can come to you. Anxiety and desperation create energetic blocks. Peace and trust create clear channels. I knew a man who needed $10,000 urgently, he affirmed. He visualized. He released it completely to divine wisdom. Then he went about his days with cheerful expectancy. Within 2 weeks, the money came not from where he expected, but through an opportunity he couldn't have orchestrated himself. Someone needed exactly the skill he had at exactly the right moment, and compensated him generously. But here's what made the difference. During those 2 weeks, he didn't obsess. He didn't check his bank account 17 times a day. He didn't tell everyone his sob story. He simply trusted that what he needed was already on its way, and he stayed available to receive it. And you know what happened? Within 2 weeks, he was offered a job, not through a desperate application, but through someone who remembered him from years ago. The perfect position, the exact salary he'd written down. The universe doesn't respond to begging, it responds to belief. This is the difference between faith and fear. Fear says, "I better hold on tight or I'll lose everything." Faith says, "I release this knowing it returns to me multiplied." Fear grips, faith flows. And what you grip, you strangle. What you release with love, you set free to grow. I've watched people destroy their blessings by refusing to let them breathe. The woman who controls every moment of her relationship until her partner feels suffocated. The parent who grips their child so tightly the child can't wait to escape. The business owner who micromanages every detail until creativity dies and employees become robots. Control is not power. Control is fear wearing a mask. Real power is the ability to release, to trust, to know that what is yours will not pass you by. Real power is understanding that the universe is not your enemy. It's not waiting for you to slip up so it can punish you. It's conspiring in your favor always, but it can only deliver to open hands. I once knew a man who received an unexpected inheritance, not a fortune, but enough to change his circumstances. And the first thing he did was hide it. He didn't tell his wife. He opened a secret account. He was so afraid someone would take it from him that he couldn't even enjoy it. He would lie awake at night worried that somehow the bank would discover an error and demand it back. That money became his prison. What should have been a blessing became a burden because he approached it with fear instead of gratitude. Eventually, a real emergency arose, a medical situation for his daughter, and he had to reveal the money anyway. But by then, the secrecy had damaged his marriage. His wife felt betrayed. The gift that could have brought joy brought division instead. His lesson that divine gifts aren't meant to be hidden, hoarded, or compartmentalized. They're meant to be integrated into the wholeness of our lives. When we split ourselves, showing one face here, another there, we fragment our own power. The universe cannot fully bless what we partially acknowledge. I've watched this pattern repeat in countless variations. The artist who hides their work because they fear judgment only to feel hollow and unfulfilled. The healer who downplays their abilities to fit in, then wonders why their practice struggles. The visionary who keeps their dreams small and quiet, afraid of seeming too ambitious, too much. What they don't realize is that every act of hiding is an act of resistance to their own expansion. Because here's what I want you to understand deeply. Your gifts are not accidents. They're not random talents distributed by some cosmic lottery. They are assignments. They are your unique way of serving the greater good. And when you refuse them, when you minimize them, when you apologize for them, you're not being humble. You're being disobedient to your own soul's purpose. True humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's recognizing that your gifts aren't about your ego. They're channels through which life itself wants to flow. I remember a woman who came to me absolutely terrified of her gift for prophecy. She would have dreams that came true, intuitions that proved accurate, but instead of embracing this ability, she fought it. She'd pray for it to go away. She'd distract herself, numb herself, anything to not feel that knowing. "Why has God cursed me with this?" she asked. I looked at her directly. "He hasn't cursed you, he's trusted you. The question is, will you trust him back?" That shift from seeing her gift as a burden to seeing it as a trust changed everything. She began to work with her intuition instead of against it. She learned to interpret what she received with wisdom, and over time, she became a source of genuine guidance for many people navigating difficult decisions. Her story illustrates a vital truth. Intuition is not meant to operate in isolation. It works best when partnered with wisdom, discernment, and a willingness to test its messages against reality. The voice within becomes clearer when we're willing to admit we might be misinterpreting it. I've noticed that people who develop the most reliable intuition share certain characteristics. They're humble about what they receive. They don't claim certainty when they feel uncertainty. They're willing to say, "I sense something here, but I'm not sure exactly what it means yet." This humility creates space for genuine guidance to emerge more clearly. They also maintain what I call grounded mysticism. They honor the spiritual dimensions of life while keeping their feet firmly planted in practical reality. They pay their bills on time. They show up for their commitments. They don't use intuition as an excuse to avoid responsibility or difficult conversations. Their spiritual practice enhances their effectiveness in the world rather than removing them from it. Another quality I observe is patience with the unfolding. They understand that some intuitive messages reveal their meaning over time. You might feel drawn to learn a particular skill and only years later discover why that training was necessary. You might feel called to a certain city, and the reason becomes apparent only after you arrive and meet specific people. This patience requires faith, not blind faith, but an earned trust in the process. Each time you follow your intuition and see it confirmed by reality, you build that trust. Each time you ignore it and face consequences, you learn to listen more carefully. The relationship deepens through experience. Now, let's address a question that often arises. What about when your intuition conflicts with your commitments? What if you're in a job or relationship and your inner guidance says it's time to leave, but you've made promises? This is where spiritual maturity becomes essential. True intuition rarely demands immediate destructive action. It doesn't typically say, abandon everything today without regard for others. Instead, it often guides us toward transition, toward having honest conversations, making thoughtful plans, honoring our commitments while also honoring our truth. I've seen people use intuition to justify abandoning responsibility, leaving chaos in their wake and calling it spiritual growth. Real spiritual discernment knows the difference between divine timing and fear-based urgency. It understands that sometimes the most spiritually courageous thing we can do is stay, finish what we started, fulfill our obligations, and then move forward with integrity intact. There's profound wisdom in the principle that how we leave one situation determines what we carry into the next. If we leave through deception, abandonment, or chaos, we carry that energy forward. The universe has a way of presenting us with the same lessons again and again until we learn to handle transitions with grace. I once counseled a woman who wanted to leave her business partnership. She felt called to a different path, which was valid. But her impulse was to suddenly withdraw all her capital, leave her partner scrambling, and justify it as following her truth. We worked on a different approach, one where she had an honest conversation, created a reasonable transition plan, ensured her partner had time to adjust, and honored the agreements she had made. The transition took 6 months instead of 6 days, but she moved forward with clear conscience and maintained a relationship that later proved valuable. More importantly, she moved forward without karmic debris clinging to her. This is the difference between spiritual maturity and spiritual bypassing disguised as intuition. Mature spirituality honors both our inner truth and our outer responsibilities. It finds the path that serves our growth without unnecessarily harming others. It recognizes that we are interconnected beings whose actions ripple outward in ways we cannot always see. True intuition often asks more of us, not less. It asks us to have difficult conversations rather than disappearing. It asks us to be honest rather than convenient. It asks us to consider not just what feels good to us, but what serves the highest good of all involved. This is why spiritual maturity isn't comfortable. It doesn't pat us on the back for feeling our feelings. It asks us to feel them deeply, honor them completely, and then choose our actions from a place of wisdom rather than woundedness. I've watched people justify the most hurtful behaviors by claiming they were honoring their truth. They ghost someone who loved them because confrontation felt uncomfortable. They abandon commitments because something shinier appeared. They break promises because keeping them required effort they no longer felt like giving. And they call it spiritual growth. But here's what I know with absolute certainty. The universe doesn't reward convenience disguised as consciousness. It rewards courage disguised as kindness. When you honor your truth in a way that also honors others, you align yourself with a flow of energy that can move mountains. When you do the hard thing, the conversation, the apology, the patient explanation, the compassionate boundary, you activate a kind of spiritual power that shortcuts built on selfishness can never access. I remember a woman who came to me devastated because her business partner had suddenly withdrawn from their venture. They'd spent 2 years building something together, and one morning she received an email saying he was following his intuition to pursue a different path. No conversation, no transition plan, no acknowledgement of the contracts they'd signed or the commitments they'd made to clients. He'd framed it as spiritual awakening. He'd said the universe was calling him elsewhere, and he had to honor that call. And perhaps it was. Perhaps his intuition was guiding him towards something new. But what he'd failed to understand is that intuition doesn't excuse integrity. Following your path doesn't mean bulldozing everyone else's. There's always a way to honor your truth that also honors your commitments. It might take longer, it might be messier, it might require you to have uncomfortable conversations and make temporary sacrifices for the sake of responsibility. But that's what maturity looks like. That's what spiritual adulthood requires. We're not children who can simply wander away when something stops entertaining us. We're beings of power and consequence, and our choices ripple outward in ways we often cannot see. When we honor our truth with integrity, those ripples create waves of possibility. When we honor our truth without integrity, those ripples create wreckage. And here's the truth that no motivational poster will tell you. Integrity isn't always rewarded in the short term. Sometimes you lose the deal because you wouldn't bend the truth. Sometimes you lose the relationship because you wouldn't betray yourself. Sometimes you stand alone because you refuse to join the chorus of convenient lies. But this is where faith becomes practical. This is where spirituality stops being about crystals and candles and becomes about steel in your spine. Because when you choose integrity, even when it costs you, you are making an investment in a currency that never devalues. You are building a foundation that cannot be shaken. You are becoming someone who can be trusted, most importantly, by yourself. I've watched people sacrifice their integrity for what they thought was success, only to find that success hollow and haunted. They got the promotion, but lost their peace. They won the argument, but destroyed the relationship. They made the money, but forfeited their self-respect. And I've watched people pay the price for their integrity, and later realize it wasn't a price at all. It was a pruning. It was life removing what didn't belong so that what truly matters could flourish. The universe has a way of honoring truth-tellers even when the world doesn't. Not always immediately, not always, obviously, but consistently over time. Those who align their power with their integrity find themselves standing on solid ground, while others sink in the quicksand of their own compromises. This is the paradox of spiritual power. The more willing you are to lose everything for your truth, the less you actually lose. Because what falls away wasn't yours to begin with. It was borrowed, conditional, dependent on your willingness to be less than you are. When you speak your truth with integrity, you are issuing an invitation to life itself. Show me what's real. Show me who belongs. Show me where I actually fit, not where I can squeeze myself into by contorting my soul. And life will answer that invitation. It always does. Sometimes the answer looks like loss. Sometimes it looks like loneliness. Sometimes it looks like starting over from scratch. But beneath that surface turbulence, something is shifting. Doors you couldn't see are opening. People who resonate with your truth are finding their way to you. Opportunities that match your authentic vibration are materializing. And here's what's remarkable. This new reality doesn't require you to force or push. It unfolds naturally when you maintain your authentic frequency. You're not chasing anymore. You're allowing. You're receiving what already belongs to you. I've watched this pattern repeat itself countless times. Someone stops performing, stops pretending, stops trying to be what they think others want, and suddenly their entire world reorganizes itself. Not because they manipulated anything, because they finally aligned with truth. The universe responds to authenticity with an efficiency that will astound you. When you stop sending mixed signals, when your inner world and outer expression match, everything moves faster. Opportunities don't require years of struggle. Connections don't demand endless networking. Success doesn't need to be extracted through exhaustion. You simply become a clear channel, and what's meant for you flows through. But here's where most people stumble again. They experience this opening, this relief, this flood of alignment, and immediately their old conditioning kicks in. They think, this is too good, this can't last, I should prepare for the other shoe to drop. And with that single thought, they begin to close the channel they just opened. Listen carefully. Your good is not a temporary reprieve. It's not a brief vacation from struggle before you return to suffering. Your authentic alignment is a permanent state available to you, sustained by your consciousness, not by external circumstances. The old you believed that ease meant you were missing something, that if life felt good, disaster must be lurking. This was the programming of unworthiness. Speaking. It taught you that you had to earn peace through suffering, that joy was suspicious, that receiving was somehow less noble than struggling. But I'm telling you, ease is your natural state. Flow is your birthright. Receiving is as sacred as giving. When you accept this, truly accept it, you stop sabotaging your good the moment it arrives. You stop looking for problems in your blessings. You stop questioning whether you deserve what's coming to you. You simply say, "Thank you. I accept this more, please." And the universe, recognizing a clear and willing vessel, says, "Finally, let me show you what I've been trying to give you all along." This is when your life becomes genuinely different. Not just a temporary high or a fleeting victory, a fundamental shift in how you exist in the world. Because here's what most people never understand about divine supply. It doesn't just mean money, it means energy, ideas, connections, opportunities, resources you didn't even know existed. I watched this happen with a woman who'd been desperately trying to launch a business for 3 years. She'd taken every course, followed every formula, worked herself into exhaustion. Nothing clicked. She came to me defeated, convinced she wasn't meant to succeed. I asked her one question. What if the business you're forcing isn't the one trying to come through you? She looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Stop pushing. I told her for 1 month. Just stop. Every morning, say this. Infinite intelligence. Show me the perfect idea that serves both my highest good and the highest good of all. 3 weeks later, she called me laughing and crying at the same time. She'd been at a coffee shop, overheard a conversation, and suddenly understood exactly what she was meant to create, not the business she'd been forcing. Something completely different, something that felt effortless. Within 6 months, she'd built something that actually worked, not because she hustled harder, but because she finally stopped blocking what was trying to come through. This is what alignment does. It doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful in a completely different way. You stop wasting energy on doors that were never meant for you. You stop forcing relationships that drain you. You stop chasing opportunities that look good but feel wrong. Instead, you become magnetic to what's actually yours. The right people start appearing. The perfect opportunities present themselves. Resources flow from directions you never anticipated. And here's the part that really changes everything. You stop feeling frantic. That desperate, grasping energy that's been driving you for years, it dissolves because you finally understand that you're not fighting for scraps in a world of scarcity. You're operating from an infinite supply that's always been available. You just couldn't see it while you were busy clinging to what wasn't working. This is the truth they don't teach you. Surrender isn't weakness. It's the ultimate power move. Because when you surrender, you're not giving up control. You're finally admitting you never had it in the first place. And that admission, that's where your real freedom begins. Think about it. How much energy have you wasted trying to force outcomes? Trying to make people love you, trying to push opportunities into existence, trying to bend reality to match the picture in your head. It's exhausting. It's like trying to swim upstream in a raging river while carrying a boulder on your back. Surrender is the moment you stop fighting the current and realize the river was always taking you exactly where you needed to go. I remember meeting this woman, let's call her Patricia. Patricia had been trying to get her adult children to appreciate her for years. She'd call them, constantly guilt them about not visiting enough, send passive-aggressive texts about being all alone. Every holiday was a negotiation, every birthday a potential battlefield. She was holding on so tight to the relationship she wanted that she was strangling the relationship she actually had. Then one day, something shifted. She got tired. Not angry tired, but soul tired. The kind of tired that makes you finally let go because you literally don't have the energy to hold on anymore. She stopped calling first, stopped sending those loaded messages, stopped expecting them to be different than they were. And you know what happened? Within 3 months, her daughter called to ask if they could have lunch, really talk, not just go through the motions. Said she'd been thinking about their relationship and wanted to understand her mom better. Patricia didn't beg for this. She didn't manipulate it into existence. She simply got out of the way and let love find its own path back to her. That's what surrender does. It clears the channel. It removes all your desperate, grasping, controlling energy from the equation and makes space for something real to emerge. When you're white-knuckling life, you're broadcasting a frequency of lack and fear. You're telling the universe, I don't trust you. I don't trust myself. I have to force this or it won't happen. And the universe, being the perfect mirror it is, reflects that distrust right back to you. But when you surrender, you're broadcasting trust. You're saying, I've done my part. I've planted the seed. Now I'm going to water it and trust the soil to do what soil does. You're operating from abundance instead of scarcity, from faith instead of fear. And here's what happens when you operate from that place. The universe meets you there because the universe doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your state of being. It responds to the vibration you're holding, the frequency you're broadcasting. When you're in a state of desperation, constantly checking, constantly monitoring, you're broadcasting lack. You're saying, I don't have it yet. Where is it? Why isn't it here? And the universe, being the perfect mirror that it is, reflects that back to you. More waiting, more absence, more of what you're focused on, which is the not having. But when you shift into that state of calm knowing, when you plant your request and walk away in faith, you're broadcasting something entirely different. You're broadcasting confidence, certainty, the energy of someone who has already received. And that, my friend, is what creates the opening for your good to rush toward you. I've seen this play out in the most remarkable ways. I knew a woman who had been trying to manifest a specific sum of money for months. She had her vision board. She said her affirmations every morning. She visualized, but nothing was moving. And the reason was clear. She was suffocating her desire with attention. Every hour she was checking her bank account. Every day she was asking, where is it? Why hasn't it come? Then one day she got so exhausted by the whole process that she just let go. Not in defeat, but in surrender. Desperate action feels heavy. It closes you off. It repels the very thing you seek. Think of a child learning to float in water. The moment they panic and thrash about, they sink. But when they relax, when they trust the water to hold them, they rise effortlessly to the surface. Your good is like that water. It will hold you. But only if you stop fighting it. I knew a man once who was obsessed with finding the perfect business opportunity. He chased every lead, attended every meeting, forced every connection. Nothing worked. Then one day, exhausted, he simply said, I'm done. Whatever is meant for me will find me. Within a week, an old acquaintance called him out of the blue with an opportunity that changed his entire life. Was it coincidence? Absolutely not. It was alignment. When he stopped transmitting desperation, he started transmitting readiness, and the universe always responds to readiness. Now, you might be asking, how do I know when I'm in alignment versus when I'm in resistance? The answer is simpler than you think. Your emotions are your compass. When you're in alignment, you feel expansive. You feel light. There's a sense of possibility even when you can't see the entire path. When you're in resistance, you feel contracted, heavy. There's a tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, a sense that you're pushing against an immovable wall. I've watched people exhaust themselves trying to force outcomes through sheer willpower. They work 18-hour days. They manipulate. They scheme. They call it hustle. But what it really is fear in motion. And here's what I've learned. Anything built on fear eventually collapses. It has to. Because fear is not a sustainable foundation. But when you align with the truth of who you are and what you truly desire, not what you think you should want, not what others expect from you, but what genuinely calls to your soul, everything shifts. The actions you take feel different. They still require effort, yes, but it's inspired effort, not desperate striving. There's a woman I know who spent years climbing the corporate ladder, checking every box society told her mattered. Good salary, impressive title, corner office. But she was miserable, absolutely miserable. Every Sunday night she'd feel this crushing dread about Monday morning, and she kept telling herself, I should be grateful. So many people would want this life. Should. That word is the graveyard of dreams. One day she finally asked herself a different question. What if I trusted what I actually want instead of what I think I should want? And what she actually wanted was to be a pastry chef. Not practical, not sensible, not what her MBA was for, but true. The moment she admitted that, just admitted it to herself without immediately shutting it down, she felt this wave of relief. Her body literally relaxed. That's alignment speaking. That's your inner wisdom saying, yes, this. Finally, this. She didn't quit her job the next day. She didn't burn her life down in some dramatic gesture, but she started taking small steps toward what was true. A weekend baking class, then another, then a part-time apprenticeship. Each step felt right in a way that climbing that corporate ladder never had. Within a year, I was teaching weekend workshops out of a community center. Within 2, I'd co-founded a small holistic wellness space with 3 other practitioners. It wasn't glamorous. We painted the walls ourselves, hunted for secondhand furniture, argued about whether we could afford a decent sound system. But standing in that space on opening day, feeling the energy of possibility humming through those rooms, I knew something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. I wasn't trying to prove I deserved to exist. I was simply doing the work I felt called to do and trusting that the right people would find me. And they did. Slowly at first, then with a momentum that sometimes startled me. People who'd been searching for exactly what I was offering. People who resonated with my particular way of seeing things. Not everyone. Of course, I wasn't trying to appeal to everyone anymore, but my people, the ones who got it. That's when I understood what Shinn meant about your word being your wand. Every decision I made from that aligned place created ripples. Every boundary I set with integrity opened a new door. Every time I chose authenticity over approval, the universe seemed to say, yes, more of that.